I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have my special guest with me, Steven Perchikov, who is here to talk about scalable personalization. And here's the thing. It's 2022 coming into 2023. Technology has changed so much, and there is technology out there to make you have such a large impact and amplify the work that you're doing. And Steven is an expert in that space. So Steven, welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast. And can you give us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. A little bit about myself. I run a sales and business development and lead generation agency and consultancy. A lot of our focus is on helping staffing and recruiting firms because our strategies work particularly well there. We put a lot of attention on LinkedIn and email, and this is where a lot of these firms live. So we have a lot of good strategies there around content, around how to handle the inbox, around how to send emails that work, and how to leverage technology in a way to scale your efforts without coming off impersonal or spammy or any of these sort of things that turn people off. How to maintain intimacy, how to scale intimacy, so to speak.
And I think that's super important because I know every single listener has gotten I would say the automated message that looks like it was canned from, 1980. And it's just like, okay, cool. Like, thanks for the ad. Like I believe that might have worked like 5 years ago, but that doesn't work today.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in general, there's variations of bad to good. I mean, there's many shades of it, right? I mean, the most obvious one is like the very long messages that are pure ads, others that are just not relevant, not well researched, clearly can sound like everything else, sound like noise, looks and sounds like everything else. That's a little different. Templates that don't work anymore, these sort of things. And then there are ways that, people respond and are pleasantly surprised. That's what all marketing and sales is about, essentially, right? Like pleasantly surprising people, standing out and getting people's attention. And that's what we try to focus on, how to do that, how to go from zero to interest.
Well, let's go ahead and get started by focusing like, what are the basics? Let's just say I'm looking at personally trying to grow my LinkedIn audience, trying to do some social selling, to grow my firm, make more placements, get more, clients. What should I be doing out there?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So the highest impact, quickest thing to do is to focus on outbound outreach, and then content is what works very, very well as well and starts to get you warm and inbound and gives you thought leadership. It just takes longer to develop. The two work hand in hand. It's not an if or and. So if you're focusing on initially the outbound piece, outreach, first and foremost, I would kind of take it back to the beginning around your own positioning and how you're positioned on, let's use LinkedIn as an example. We could also use email, but let's stick to LinkedIn, but most of this applies to email too. On LinkedIn, for example, how your profile looks, right? Have you chosen a niche? Are you the go-to market leader in this one niche? Are you just a generalist recruiter? Are you focused on startups? Are you focused on structural engineers? Are you focused on management consultancies? Whatever that is, that's a larger strategic question that's answered in the background. If you have that honed in, it makes things a lot easier. It allows you now to put that positioning on your profile, what your headline looks like, your about section, a few posts. These are major factors in what people decide to respond to you. Even if your message is so-so, if they can sometimes see your profile and it looks like you're the best at this thing, then they may respond to you anyway, right? Because that's what most people do. They check your profile and then decide what to say. So don't worry if this isn't you yet. It's a process honing in on a niche. It's a process like committing to a niche, and it's not something to be rushed. In the meantime, what you can do is commit to mini niches through your outbound messaging. That's what we often suggest. You start running these like mini tests. This is what a lot of startups do. Before deciding on what their product is, they'll run 100 ad campaigns all for like $50 and see to landing pages without products to see what will stick and what will work. And they'll be hyper focused and hyper niched. And that's what you can do with your outbound outreach campaigns into people's inboxes. So if you have 3 or 4 ideas, we recently had a client who was focused on startups, but they also had helped with the hospitality industry and travel and all these sorts of things. So we came up with 5 or 6 different ideas, and we did outreach to those and saw what worked and analyzed those results. So that's a high level. On a more kind of like, can I keep talking, or am I talking?
Yeah, keep going.
All right. On a more like strategic level, what the goal is, the meta goal of all of this is this idea of scalable personalization, which is how can you write a message to someone? How can you get in front of someone and make them feel like you hand wrote that message yourself, even though you're using a little bit of automation to help scale that outreach? How do you do that? Because if you just handwrite messages all day, you're going to pleasantly surprise people. They're going to like that. But it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And if you just blast people all the time with not so great messages, you'll also get some leads that way, but you'll burn a lot of bridges and you'll bother people in the process. So how do you find the blend of the two, where that Venn diagram intersects of scale and personalization? And that's where you start digging into some strategies. So one of our favorite strategies is to research, like this other, let's use this other example. Another client of ours, she hires engineers. So she gave us a number of titles of the kind of engineers she hires. They're often like build bridges. They're actually civil engineers, structural engineers, this sort of thing. So it's a pretty tight niche. So we'll find, she gave us a sense of like the title, like head VPs of structural engineering is a title. So we'll scrape Indeed, we'll scrape LinkedIn, and we'll find the places that are hiring for these positions. Then we'll make a list of all of those companies. Then we'll find all the hiring managers there. Maybe it's the talent acquisition specialist. Maybe it's the director of structural engineering or VP of direction, whoever is the hiring manager. And then we'll tailor some messaging to them. So if you make that list, then you can write a personalized, what's the message that you would write? Well, the message that you would write is probably something like, hey, Frank, great to connect into your background as a structural engineer at ABC Construction. Doing a little research and saw your post on Indeed and LinkedIn for a structural engineer position in Atlanta. And that's part of why I'm reaching out. We focus on placing quality structural engineers at companies like yours, and we happen to have a few in the Atlanta area. I wanted to connect with you, get to know you a little bit better, and start the relationship. Are you open to a brief chat later this week or next? So that's really personalized. If you send like 50 of those by hand, you'd get 5 meetings. Like I'm almost sure of it. So, but if you do that research beforehand and you build these lists and then you plug these lists into a number of automation technologies, you essentially can send those messages, but you can send a follow-up message and a follow-up, like 4 or 5 messages, hit them up on email, all mentioning this personalized kind of thing. And that's where you can then, you do the work beforehand, and then you put it in the machine and you click go. And then when you click go, you just let it do its magic and you just check your inbox and see what's in there. And usually it'll be good stuff if you do that. Like people will say, wow, like thanks for taking the time to read my profile. Like or they'll ignore you or they'll say no thank you, but they won't be pissed and you'll have a higher hit rate than if you do something otherwise.
I personally always appreciate a salesperson that reaches out to me. That's just like, you can tell they like did a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
And, that does go a long way. And, that has led to conversations. And it's one of the things I think the recruiting, the talent acquisition, the staffing industry is very, very old school with how we message and how we copy. And like, I think our industry is constantly ripe for, disruption, and disruption, something like this is simple.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So yeah. I got to ask, like, great copy, great marketing. How did you like roll into this industry on helping recruiters and staffing companies grow?
Well, I rolled into every industry, and then I just started focusing on the industry where we were getting the best results. I started my background in tech startups, working at tech startups and companies without marketing teams. I was a salesperson there. I realized pretty quickly if I wanted to make commission, I had to figure out how to get my own leads. So I was very motivated because I lived in New York City and rents are high there and I wanted to be successful. So I found all the latest technologies. I read all the books on copy. I was constantly researching how to get better, and I got better. And I figured out how to leverage these tools to get in front of open doors at Apple, IBM, with new technologies that they'd never heard of, at companies they'd never heard of. So I got good at this. I did this at a number of startups. I did well. I was always a top performer. And then after the third one, I felt like I got something here. Like I can make this happen. I can do this for someone. I could do this for others. Maybe I have a service here. So I wrote an email, made a little case study, sent it to 10 people in my network that were in the startup space. And that's how I got my first clients. A week later, I was making, more money than I was in my salary position. And then it kind of built momentum from there. And I worked with every B2B industry you can think of: insurance, consultants, coaches, management consultants, and then staffing and recruiting companies. And, I wanted to put my attention. So I had this talent and this gift, but this talent and gift, like in the startup world where people are very advanced and sophisticated and constantly looking for the new thing, was like, there was a lot of people with that. But then when I turned to the recruiting space, it was like, oh, like here's an industry where this will be beneficial, but people are not adapting as fast. They don't have all this stuff in place yet. And so it's starting now. I feel the tide has turned and that momentum is there now. And this industry is in the process of being transformed. And I can see and hear, like there's writing on the wall, and I can see the recruiters. Like it's kind of an arms race. Like the ones that are doing this versus the ones that aren't. And the ones that aren't are getting a little bit left behind, and they feel that. And then we've gotten clients who said that exact same thing. Like, I don't want to be left behind. I feel like others are doing this. Like, I want to learn. So it's like, cool. Like, here's where we can add value, like a clear place where we can add value. And so that's not where the only industry we work with, but a vast majority of our clients this year have been coming from that space.
So I know one of the biggest places that us recruiters typically live is LinkedIn. It's a necessary evil. The algorithm's always changing. The algorithm is not like the algorithm like it used to be like 2-3 years ago. It's very made for like a special type of copy. But how do you stay above the noise as a recruiter on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Well, these tactics that I'm talking about are not implemented by a lot of people, So the algorithm is mostly geared around the content. Like there's still tools that let you send 50 to 100 connections a day, 50 to 100 messages a day. That using those tools already is there. And there's some tools that stop working and some tools that work. So like, if you know which ones work, like a good one is Ulink and SkyLeads. These still work really well. And like 90% of them stopped working over the last 2-3 months. So like that gives you a little bit of an edge. You've stayed on top of that and this one works. And then if you do this strategy that I'm talking about where it takes some work up front to do, like you need some VAs in place to do some scraping, to put them all in the system. So it takes some work to get that process in place. But if you have that process and others don't, and you have the right copy and the right positioning, you're already staying above the noise. Like you're doing something other people aren't, and the thing you're doing is good. It's a personalized kind of thing, so it's that helps.
So at the moment, what is the LinkedIn algorithm like highlighting? Okay.
On the content side, they're still highlighting certain things like they used to really be focused on video, but now it's still a mix. Like a video, my content, written content works as well as video these days. But on the content side, so like I'll speak to the content side because that's where the algorithm is more dynamic. On the content side, they really like stories still, like this kind of broetry style poetry kind of thing, like a narrative where I call it mythic content because. Okay. Stories where you place your client in the role of the hero and yourself as the guide, those kind of like 10, 15 line stories where it's like just got off the phone with a client with a prospect, and he just mentioned how difficult it's been how difficult it's been to hire in 2022. Prospects demand higher pay. Employees demand higher pay, but the profit margins aren't there to support it. This is what I'm hearing over and over across hiring managers all across the country. But what they don't know is that there's actually another way, right? There's actually another way, and that there's another way forward. And then you kind of display, like, there's staffing, you can staff remote workers from the Philippines, or, you can find new ways of hiring right employees in tertiary markets, or whatever it is. Like, and then you give your little bit of wisdom that changes their mind or blows their mind. And that sort of thing gets a lot of traction. And then if you could also make some stories about yourself to let them know about you, that's kind of the right blend, stories that meet your prospects with the problems that they have, that the beliefs that they have stated, meet them where they are in the framework of a story, and then guide them to another way of thinking that's better and helpful. That starts establishing you as a thought leader and starts pulling people towards you.
And it's amazing how watching those kind of posts just get massive amount of impressions. Like, stuff that wasn't even capable 1 to 2 years ago. Like, I got some friends pulling in like 600,000-700,000 impressions per post based on writing the content that way. And of course, I think all us recruiters, content writing is something that we all need to learn how to do a little better.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So exactly. Those things help a great deal. And then on the inbox side, LinkedIn has been cracking down on too much volume of outreach. Like, they've kind of limited it to 100 connections a week if you just click the connect button. But there are ways around it. Like, there are ways around it with certain tools that don't get you in trouble, like by inviting people via email. And you can still maintain, 50 plus invites a day if you invite people by email. Maybe they'll shut down this feature in a year, but while it's there, you can still build up your footprint there doing these sorts of things.
Yeah, real quick, explain that. Like, inviting people by email on LinkedIn, like, what is that?
Yeah. So some of these tools that I mentioned, so you can press connect. Usually when you want to connect with someone, you press connect, and that lets you connect with them. And then by doing that, they accept, and then you can message them and send them stuff. You can only do that 100 people a week. You used to be able to do that like 100 people a day. Now you can only do 100 people a week. But there's a back end to LinkedIn where you can, if you have their email address, you can enter their email address. And then if that email address matches the one in the LinkedIn database, then it assumes that you know them, and you can send them a connection request that way. So some of these tools have linked up with massive databases of all the confirmed LinkedIn email addresses. And when you put someone in there, like you put someone in this tool, like from a LinkedIn URL, it verifies their profile with an email address it has, and it sends them an invite that way. So it's the same. It pops up as a connection request for them, but you just use another modality in terms of sending that connection request that LinkedIn is still cool with.
That's great. And before the end of the podcast, I'm going to ask you to do a full tools rundown of your favorite tools. Make sure to include that in there. But
yeah,
let's definitely keep on going. Where can a recruiter learn how to write mythic content?
Great question. Well, I'll send an ebook to you and to everyone that if they like. It breaks down about 15 posts, line by line, with templates, and each of these posts is directly led to clients for us. So we've taught recruiters how to just take these posts, take the same sentences, put your words in there, and then that will help you get some momentum with clients. So that's something I would recommend for sure.
I'll put that link in the show notes for all the listeners. But yeah, I think that's great. And this is something I want to read, how you guys broke down exactly what is working.
Absolutely.
Because I for a while, writing articles was a great way for me to get new business. And, there's still some business that comes in from writing articles because I have no clue how people find them, but, it gives you a little bit of authority, but, great posts are pulling in massive amount of impressions.
Absolutely.
So the economy is changing. We're coming off of extremely high inflation. Everybody's talking about a potential downturn of the economy. What advice would you recommend to recruiters and staffing industry experts on how to prepare for a potential downturn?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I'm not sure exactly what the answer would be. I mean, from my speaking to clients, right? From speaking to clients, the ones that are, the way that they're preparing is that they're becoming the go-to source in a very particular part of the industry, right? Like they're nurturing their relationships now. They're deciding like, I'm only focused on startups. I'm only focused on this industry. And they're just establishing their footprint in that space and being like the go-to leader there, right? They're also thinking a little bit around what industries will be hit the hardest. I have a client who helps marketers, hiring marketers at advertising agencies, and they're preparing for this and hedging again, because advertising agencies usually get hit pretty hard in recessions. They're usually the first to go. And so they lose a lot of employees and all these sorts of things. They cut back on teams. So they're kind of hedging by also focusing on marketing hires in other industries that, like oil and energy or, startup, whatever it is. Like they're kind of hedging against where they think things are going. So I think having a pulse on your industry and then knowing which industries might be a little bit more resilient in the year to come is a good way to do it. And then the other piece is, I mean, some of the things that I'm describing, like not to like be a guy with a hammer and seeing a nail everywhere, but like if you are marketing well and you have some of these strategies, like the leads will still come. If you know how to do this, you can find like that one strategy of like finding companies that are hiring and then like putting that out as a large outreach to exactly help people fill that role with candidates that you have and put that on autopilot for like 10, 15 job postings all around the country. There's a need there. And like you have a good chance of being the one to be chosen to fulfill that need because you're following up systematically in a way that others aren't.
And the key is in the follow-up.
Yeah.
100% on that. Well, let me switch gears a little bit. This is a question that I ask every single guest. What book has had a huge impact on your career?
That's a great question. The biggest books in terms of biggest books in terms of my career, tactically, I would say, has been Predictable Revenue, which speaks about a lot of these strategies. One of the first books to do is The Head of Sales of Salesforce, describing how he grew Salesforce using some of these strategies when Salesforce was still a startup. And he wrote it 10 years ago, so it's a bit older. And then as far as just sales conversations, The Challenger Sale and Spin Selling have been two of the most important books for me in terms of learning the right process of how to have a good sales conversation.
I think that Challenger Sale should be like every book every recruiter should pick up going into next year.
Totally. And then when you learn the foundational concepts for that, it's the same thing. Like, what's mythic content? Well, mythic content is just a challenger post where you're challenging people's beliefs, their ideas by meeting them where they are and taking them this direction. What is spin selling challenge? It's just having conversations and meeting people where they are and showing them that there's another way when that other way is better. People respect you as a consultant for that. And that's another thing that makes you invaluable in people wanting to work with you.
So you talk to a lot of recruiters. What advice would you give to a person that just started in the recruiting industry?
Someone who's just started.
Mm-hmm.
If you've just started, because I think about this too, like now that I'm, like there's a part of me that wants to do some recruiting and staffing because I've helped some, like a fair amount of them. I think if you're just starting, you want to find a place in the industry where you would fit, where others wouldn't, right? So when I think about like for myself, right, like because I'm potentially a recruiter that's just starting, because I think about it sometimes, like it seems like a fun space after working with a couple of them. So like I like sales, I like training salespeople, I like placing salespeople. I have a vision of maybe bringing salespeople, training them to be SDRs. This is something I do in my own company right now, and then placing them at other companies, right? And so that becomes like a training and recruiting firm. I'm very well suited to do that because I've been in the lead gen now for so long, training SDRs and having trying to stay on the cutting edge of what these practices are. So it seems like a really good place for me to be and play in that others can't play in as well. So it's a natural kind of inclination. So if you're going in that space, what's natural for you? And I think maybe you start there, and then as you're starting there, see how the market responds, and keep your ears open where there may be opportunities that pop up for you that weren't so obvious. Because when I started, I went after SaaS and startups, and those were my initial clients because that's the industry I came from. But little by little, I kept my ears open, and I started to see how much I enjoyed working with these other companies and where the results were coming from, and working with staffing and recruiting companies, and that helped. I just stayed open. I just stayed open, and it led me there. And that's another thing to keep your eye on. So momentum, having conversations, getting momentum, and then seeing where those conversations are leading you. Action, taking these actions to get conversations going with hiring managers, with candidates, putting yourself out there with posts, putting yourself out there, building this momentum, and then the market gives you feedback and you start choosing a direction. That's what it's all about.
Okay. And for the listeners, I promised that I was going to ask Steven about the tool list. At the moment, what tools would you recommend? And real quick, before answers, tools always change. What works today might not work tomorrow, especially with LinkedIn. So just want to give that preface. But Steven, what tools are you recommending right now to recruiters? And,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Best tools for LinkedIn outreach is Ulink and Skyleads. Both really good tools. Skyleads also has an email outreach functionality, so we're really big fans of this tool. Ulink has really been one we've used for 5 years. We're kind of moving towards Skyleads recently, but both are really good. Another great tool is called the Data Scraper, and that's really good for just scraping email addresses, and it's really affordable. If you want really high quality data, like email addresses, phone numbers, all these sort of things, there's one called seamless.ai. It's a bit pricier, but it's really, really, really good high quality data. And these are the main tools. And then for a lot of the outreach, I would recommend using Sales Navigator because their filters are really good. I know a lot of folks use Recruiter already, obviously. That's great for candidate searches. Sales Navigator is, I think, an additional $79 a month, and it's really worth it because it plays well with these tools. And most of these tools I'm describing are in the $50 to $100 a month range. But when used well, they give you the value of one or two full-time sales professionals for the price of a couple $100 a month.
Now the Skyleads, does that also do email marketing too?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I think I'm still using Woodpecker from a recommendation years ago.
Tool. Yeah, we use Woodpecker too. What I like about Skyleads is that it blends the two. You can do message on LinkedIn, email, message on LinkedIn. So I've always been looking for a tool that kind of blends the two, and Skyleads has been doing a pretty good job at that.
Cool. I'll definitely check that out. And for the listeners, I'll put that in the show notes also, so you guys can easily find it. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the listeners?
I think that covers just about everything. If you want any help specifically or talk about some of the things that you're looking to achieve, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is steven@artofsalesacademy.com. The website is artofsalesacademy.com. And there's a big booking button on the upper right-hand side. You can schedule a call, and you'll be speaking directly with me. And I'd be happy to help you with some of this stuff. Wish you luck and implementing some of these tools because I think it's really cornerstone work for success in the recruiting space these days.
Absolutely. Well, Steven, thank you for coming on and definitely talking about scalable personalization because there's only so many hours during a day. and so many hours that we can get stuff done, and just finding a way to amplify your voice, amplify your outreach, amplify your sales, and amplify being able to reach out to candidates is imperative going into this 2023 year. So Steven, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And for the listeners, until next time.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.